things happen to all of us on our way through life, without our noticing for a time that they have happened.
Thus, to take an instance, we suddenly discover that we have been deaf in one ear for we don't know how long, but say half an hour.
Now, such an experience had come that night to Peter.
When we last saw him,
he was stealing across the island with one finger to his lips and his dagger at the ready.
He had seen the crocodile pass by without noticing anything peculiar about it.
But by and by, he remembered that it had not been ticking.
At first, he thought this eerie,
but soon concluded rightly that the clock had run down.
Without giving a thought to what might be the feelings of a fellow creature thus abruptly deprived of its closest companion, Peter began to consider how he could turn the catastrophe to his own use.
And he decided to tick.
So that wild beasts should believe he was the crocodile and let him pass unmolested.
Peter reached the shore without mishap and went straight on,
his legs encountering the water as if quite unaware that they had entered a new element.
Peter thought he had scaled the Jolly Roger's side as noiselessly as a mouse, and he was amazed to see the pirates cowering from him,
with Hook in their midst, as abject as if he had heard the crocodile.
The crocodile!
No sooner did Peter remember it than he heard the ticking.
At first,
he thought the sound did come from the crocodile.
And he looked behind him swiftly.
Then he realised he was doing it himself.
And in a flash, he understood the situation.
How clever of me!
He signed to the boys not to burst into applause.
It was at this moment that Ed Taint, the quartermaster, emerged from the forecastle and came along the deck.
Peter struck true and deep.
John clapped his hands on the ill-fated pirate's mouth to stifle the dying groan. He fell forward.
4 boys caught him to prevent the thud.
Peter gave the signal, and the carrion was cast overboard. There was a splash.
And then silence.
1.
Slightly had begun to count.
None too soon, Peter,
every inch of him on tiptoe,
vanished into the cabin. For more than one pirate was screwing up his courage to look around.
They could each hear each other's distressed breathing now, which showed them that the more terrible sound had passed.
"'Tis gone, Captain,"
Smee said, wiping off his spectacles.
"All still again."
Slowly, Hook let his head emerge from his ruff and listened so intently that he could have caught the echo of the tick.
There was not a sound.
And he drew himself up firmly to his full height.
"Then here's to Johnny Plank!"
He broke into the villainous ditty.
Yo ho, the frisky plank, you walks along it so, till it goes down and you goes down to Davy Jones below.
To terrorise the prisoners the more,
Though with a certain loss of dignity,
he danced along an imaginary plank, grimacing at them as he sang.
You want to touch of the cat o' nine tails before you walk plank.
At that, they fell on their knees.
No! They cried so piteously that every pirate smiled.
Fetch the cat, Jukes. It's in the cabin.
The cabin!
Peter was in the cabin.
The children gazed at each other.
Aye, aye. The children followed Jukes with their eyes.
Yo ho, the scratching cat, its tails are 9, you know, and when they're writ upon your back,
What was the last line will never be known.
For of a sudden, the song was stayed by a dreadful screech from the cabin.
Then was heard a crowing sound, which was well understood by the boys.
But to the pirates was almost more eerie than the screech.
What was that?
2.
The Italian Cecco hesitated for a moment and then swung into the cabin.
He tottered out, haggard.
What's the matter with Bill Jukes, you dog?
The matter with him is he's dead, stabbed.
Bill Jukes dead?
The cabin's as black as a pit, but there is something terrible in there. The thing you heard crowing.
The exultation of the boys,
The lowering looks of the pirate.
both were seen by Hook.
Jacko,
Said in his most steely voice.
go back and fetch me out that doodle-doo.
Cecco, bravest of the brave, cowered before his captain, crying,
No, no.
but Hook was purring to his claw.
Did you say you would go, Jacko?
Cecco went, first flinging his arms despairingly.
There was no more singing,
All listened now.
and again came a death screech.
And again, a crow.
No one spoke, except slightly.
3.
Hook rallied his dogs with a gesture.
It's death and odds, fish. Who is to bring me that doodle-doo?
Wait till Cecco comes out.
I think I heard you volunteer, Starky.
No, by thunder.
My Hook thinks you did. I wonder if it would not be advisable, Starky, to humour the Hook.
I'll swing before I go in there.
And again he had the support of the crew.
Is this mutiny?
Oh, Captain, mercy.
Shake hands, Starky.
Starky looked round for help, but all deserted him.
As he backed up, Hook advanced, and now the red spark was in his eye.
With a despairing scream, the pirate leapt upon Long Tom and precipitated himself into the sea.
4.
And now, did any other gentleman say mutiny?
Hook seized a lantern and raised his claw with a menacing gesture.
I'll bring out that doodle-doo myself.
Hook sped into the cabin.
5.
Slightly longed to say it,
He wetted his lips to be ready,
but Hook came staggering out.
without his lantern.
Something blew out the light.
He said a little unsteadily.
Something?
What of Cecco?
As dead as Jukes.
His reluctance to return to the cabin impressed them all unfavourably, and the mutinous sounds again broke forth.
All pirates are superstitious, and Noodler cried,
They do say the surest sign a ship's accursed is when there's one on board more than can be accounted for.
I've heard he always boards the pirate craft last. Had he a tail, Captain?
They say that when he comes, it's in the likeness of the wickedest man aboard.
Had he a hook, Captain?
Oh, the ship's doomed.
At this, the children could not resist raising a cheer.
Hook had well nigh forgotten his prisoners.
But as he swung round on them now, his face lit up again.
Lads, now here's a notion. Open the cabin door and drive them in. Let them fight the doodle-doo for their lives. If they kill him, we're so much the better. If he kills them, we're none the worse.
For the last time, his dogs admired Hook, and devotedly they did his bidding.
The boys,
Pretending to struggle,
were pushed into the cabin and the door was closed on them.
Now listen.
and all listened, but not one dared to face the door.
Yes, one,
Wendy.
who all this time had been bound to the mast. It was for neither a scream nor a crow that she was watching.
It was for the reappearance of Peter.
She had not long to wait.
In the cabin, he had found the thing for which he had gone in search, the key that would free the children of their manacles, and now they all stole forth, armed with such weapons as they could find.
First, signing them to hide, Peter cut Wendy's bonds, and then nothing could have been easier than for them all to fly off together.
But one thing barred the way, an oath.
Hook or me this time.
So when he had freed Wendy, he whispered for her to conceal herself with the others, and he himself took her place by the mast.
Her cloak around him so that he should pass for her.
Then he took a great breath and crowed.
Lads!
He was ready to cajole or strike as need be, but never quailing for an instant.
I've thought it out. There's the Jonah aboard.
Aye, a man with a hook.
No. Lads, no, it's the girl. Never was luck on a pirate ship with a woman on board. We'll right the ship when she's gone.
Ah, it's worth trying.
Fling the girl overboard.
And they made a rush at the figure in the cloak.
There's none can save you now, missy. There's one.
Who's that?
Peter Pan, the Avenger.
Came the terrible answer, and as he spoke, Peter flung off his cloak. Then they all knew who 'twas that had been undoing them in the cabin. And twice Hook essayed to speak, and twice he failed.
In that frightful moment, I think his fierce heart broke.
Cleave him to the brisket.
Down, boys, and at 'em.
Peter's voice rang out, and in another moment the clash of arms was resounding through the ship.
Some of the miscreants leapt into the sea.
Others hid in dark recesses, where they were found by Slightly, who did not fight, but ran about with a lantern which he flashed in their faces, so that they were half blinded and fell as an easy prey to the reeking swords of the other boys.
There was little sound to be heard but the clang of weapons.
An occasional screech or splash.
And slightly, monotonously counting,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
I think all were gone when a group of savage boys surrounded Hook.
this man alone seemed to be a match for them all.
Again and again they closed upon him.
And again he hewed a clear space.
Put up your swords, boys. This man is mine.
Thus, suddenly, Hook found himself face to face with Peter.
The others drew back and formed a ring around them.
For long the two enemies looked at each other,
Hook shuddering slightly,
and Peter with a strange smile upon his face.
So, Pan, this is all you're doing.
Aye, James Hook, it is all my doing.
Proud and insolent youth, prepare to meet thy doom.
Dark and sinister man, have at thee.
Without more words they fell to, and for a space there was no advantage to either blade.
Peter was a superb swordsman, but his shorter reach stood him in ill stead, and he could not drive the steel home.
Hook,
scarcely his inferior in brilliancy,
but not quite so nimble in wrist play,
forced him back by the weight of his onset, hoping suddenly to end all with a favourable thrust taught him long ago by barbecue at Rio. But to his astonishment, he found this thrust turned aside again and again.
Then he sought to close and gave the quietus with his iron hook, which all this time had been pawing the air. But Peter doubled under it and, lunging fiercely, pierced him in the ribs.
At the sight of his own blood, whose peculiar colour was offensive to him, the sword fell from Hook's hand, and he was at Peter's mercy.
Now!
But with a magnificent gesture, Peter invited his opponent to pick up his sword.
Hook did so instantly, but with a tragic feeling that Peter was showing good form.
Hitherto he had thought it was some fiend fighting him, but a darker suspicion assailed him now.
Man, who and what art thou?
I'm youth. I'm joy. I'm a little bird that has broken out of the egg.
Abandoning the fight, Hook rushed into the powder magazine and fired it.
2 minutes, the ship will be blown to pieces.
But Peter issued from the powder magazine with the shell in his hands and calmly flung it overboard.
Hooray!
The other boys were flying around Hook now, flouting, scornful, and he staggered about the deck, striking up at them impotently, his mind no longer with them.
James Hook, thou not wholly unheroic figure, farewell.
For we have come to his last moment.
Seeing Peter slowly advancing upon him through the air with dagger poised, he sprang upon the bulwarks to cast himself into the sea.
He did not know that the crocodile was waiting for him.
For we purposely stopped the clock that this knowledge might be spared him.
A little mark of respect from us at the end,
He had one last triumph.
which I think we need not grudge him.
As he stood on the bulwark, looking over his shoulder at Peter gliding through the air, he invited him with a gesture to use his foot. It made Peter kick instead of stab.
At last, Hook had got the boon for which he craved.
Bad form.
He cried jeeringly and went content to the crocodile.
Thus perished James Hook.
17.